So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I extend a very warm welcome to the participants of the International Online Conference on Renewable Music. I'm glad that we have visitors from all over the world, even from Brazil. Welcome to you. Welcome as president of the Polish Composers Union, the originator and main organizer of the conference and the entire Renewable Music project. We are implementing it within the framework of European Commission Creative Europe to 2021-2027 program. Our partners in the project are the Berg Orchestra from Prague, represented by Ewa Keslowa, Waves Bratislava, a company of Olga Smetanova, and the new Hungarian Music Association, represented by Bela Simon. The project is coordinated by Dr. Agnieszka Cieślak-Krupa. Please show up. Olga, Ewa, Agnieszka, and only Bela is not here, but maybe later.
Bela is connecting right now.
He's being connected.
I just can't see him. He's there.
Okay.
Bela, show up.
Bela?
He just doesn't have the camera on.
Yes. So the conference, which begins today, is the final act of the Renewable Music project. In the already completed artistic parts of the project, composers from the Visegrad Group countries selected through a competition were tasked with composing 4 new works inspired by the idea of musical renewability. Compositions by Katarzyna Krzewińska-Zdebik, Jan Mikiska, Katarzyna Krzewińska-Zdebik from Poland, Jan Mikiska from the Czech Republic, Samuel Chwozdik from Slovakia, and Mate Balog from Hungary, were premiered at 4 concerts in Warsaw, Prague, Bratislava, and Budapest by local orchestras, whose lineup was supplemented by musicians from the partner countries. By organizing outdoor concerts in unusual locations, outside of standard concert halls, in green areas of the city, where people seek refuge from the hustle and bustle of everyday life, we wanted to reach new audiences, introducing them not only to contemporary music, but also to the ecological ideas that underlie our project. The theoretical conclusion of the project is our conference on ecological ideas and music. The title of the project, Renewable Music, refers to renewable, inexhaustible sources of natural energy such as solar, wind, and water. Preserved energies, as they represent the energetic potential activated and renewed in each performance dealing with music. The successive uses of music, whether recorded in sheet music, recorded on permanent media, or existing in people's memories, is the release of its cultural energy. Does ecology lend itself to a discussion of music? I hope that our conference will clarify many of the problems that arise with such a juxtaposition, though probably not all of them. I wish you a successful deliberation.
Thank you, Dr. Kominek, and good morning.
everyone. I'm Agnieszka Cieślak-Krupa, and I would also like to extend a warm welcome to you all to this international online conference on renewable music, an unprecedented event in its field. This multidimensional term, renewable music, was coined only 2 years ago when we began discussions on a joint European project focused on contemporary music creation and sustainability. As the coordinator of this project, of which the conference is a part, I am required to address a few formal matters. Firstly, we have introduced a few minor adjustments to the program, so kindly refer to the updated version on our website at www.renmus.eu under the conference tab. Secondly, please be advised that the entire conference is being recorded for documentation purposes. I would like to remind all speakers to strictly adhere to their allotted time slots to prevent any delays in the schedule. Please remain attentive to the chat messages and visual cues provided by session moderators. Before I proceed further, I would like to briefly present a logo board. As Dr. Kominek has already noted, this conference represents the concluding stage of the project Renewable Music Before Composers for Sustainability, which has been developed in collaboration with 4 partners from the Visegrad Group countries. You can see their logos here. We are fortunate to have received funding from the European Union through its Creative Europe program, as well as support from our governments, specifically the Ministry of Culture and National Heritage of Poland and the Slovak Arts Council. Our media partner for this conference is Ruch Muzyczny magazine. Our media patrons include the Polish Music Information Center Polmik, Glissando magazine, and Dwójka Polish Radio Channel 2. We extend our sincere gratitude to all these institutions and organizations for their invaluable support. I'm confident that we will not encounter any technical issues at all. And finally, it is time, and it is my great pleasure to hand over to Professor Sławomira Żerańska-Kominek, head of the conference scientific committee, who will welcome our first keynote speaker.
Good morning. Good morning. It is with the greatest pleasure that I am going to present, to introduce Professor Solomos' lecture now. It is the greatest pleasure that I would like to introduce and welcome Professor Makis Solomos, whom I thank for accepting our invitation to give the opening lecture of our conference. My only regret is that we are meeting only by computer and not in person, as we said. While this is a very ecological meeting formula, it remains tainted by this distance between us. However, I hope that this is not our last meeting and that there will still be an opportunity and a chance to talk directly. Ladies and gentlemen, Makis Solomos is a professor at the University of Paris 8. He is involved in new music and is one of the main specialists in Xenakis music. He was co-organizer of the International Symposium Xenakis 22 on the occasion of the composer's 100th anniversary. He presented Xenakis Revolutions at the Paris Philharmonic in 2022. His book, De la musique au son, published in 2013, was translated into English in 2020, and it is a very interesting reflection on sound as an essential subject of contemporary compositional work. In his latest book, published in 2023, Exploring the Ecologies of Music and Sound, Professor Solomos examines environmental, mental, and social ecologies through the perspective of the history of music and artivism, i.e. artistic practice aimed in influencing social-political reality. He is particularly interested in artistic activities in the fields of acoustic ecology, contemporary music, and sound art. Today, we will hear a lecture entitled Music, Ecologies, and Degrowth, a few paths to explore. Dear Professor Solomos, I welcome you not in Warsaw, but from Warsaw, and give you the floor. Okay.
Thank you very much, Professor Kominek. Hello, everybody. Good morning. I'm very glad to be there in bracket, even if it is not in really presence. And I would like to thank the organization committee for inviting me. I will share immediately the screen. So I think it's okay. Initially, I was asked to speak on Xenakis and nature, as I'm a specialist of his music. But as the last years, I have been working on music, sound, and ecology. Professor Kominek mentioned my last book. I suggested to speak on ecology, and more particular on the topic that I've just begun to work on, degrowth or the post-growth, maybe. I hoped that I could speak also a little bit on Xenakis, but finally, as you will see, it won't be possible because it's not easy to speak about degrowth on Xenakis. He belongs to the generation of modern music in the 50s, 60s, so it's a different situation. In this presentation, I will take some material from my book, but I will have also some new material. I will start speaking generally about my vision of ecology, which includes, as said Professor Kominek, simultaneously environmental, also social, and also mental ecologies. Then I will speak generally about degrowth, and then we will enter into music with some case studies. As my accent in English is not very good, very French, I will show you the text that I will read. I think it will be much more comfortable for you, much more easy to follow. So let's begin with the question of the three ecologies and degrowth. Over the last few years, we have witnessed the birth of environmental art and environmental aesthetic, Nathalie Blanc, that some have even termed Anthropocene art. I quote here Paul Ardenne, historian of art in France. Musicians and musicologists, with, of course, the exception of acoustic ecology, were slower to take this ecological turn, perhaps because music seems to need more equipment, and equipment is crucial to this issue, or perhaps because the mimetic relationship with what we continue to call natural, although it will be better to speak about the living, although this mimetic relationship has persisted, preventing material links from being formed. But awareness of the environment is now emerging and doing much to animate the work of many sound artists, field recordists, etc. This ecological turn in art needs to rise to the challenges of environmental ecology. The climate disruption will see us enter an era of global catastrophes caused by increasingly extreme climate-related events, floods, hurricanes, tsunamis, fires, etc. We are also becoming aware of the erosion of biodiversity, which is bringing us close to the sixth mass extinction. There is no need to be an expert in theories of collapsology and disaster, still less a survivalist like Donald Trump and his followers, to be accurately worried and to want to act and not only reflect. Now, it has become common to talk of the Anthropocene when discussing this area of global catastrophes. However, more and more thinkers and militants believe that the term Anthropocene, although useful in its primary definition, which is, Crutzen says, a new geological era in which the influence of humans will have a significant impact on the history of the Earth. So this term, although this primary definition, is ambiguous in terms of its social and political aspects. Not all humans have the same carbon footprint. What common measure could be applied to Vladimir Putin or Benjamin Netanyahu, who destroy with a lot of energy and thus a lot of carbon footprint lives, cities, hospitals, schools, and to a Palestinian, a Jewish, Israeli, an Ukrainian, or a Russian small farmer. In fact, this environmental crisis is also a socio-political crisis. Environmental disasters destroy the dichotomy between nature and culture. I quote here the French philosopher Catherine Larère and Raphaël Larère. They say the environmental crisis is the natural erupting into the social, which means that our environmental problems are also social problems, and the social making its mark on the natural. Some of the activities linked to our social lives, especially since the Industrial Revolution, are damaging nature. And I will only add that in poor countries, India, etc., the struggle for economic and social well-being often takes into account the defense of the ecosystems of the living. Now, when we talk about several dominations or about social ecology, in the same terms as environmental ecology, we highlight the fact that the eco, in the word ecology, is complex and contains many interlocking layers. We can thus also evoke a mental ecology to refer to the close links between the environmental crisis and the problems people are currently experiencing in terms of the feelings or the way of existing in the world. So here, I will recall the visionary theory of the French philosopher and psychanalyst Félix Guattari, who already in 1989, in his very small book, The Three Ecologies, wrote, I quote him, "The Earth is undergoing a period of intense techno-scientific transformations. If no remedy is found, the ecological disequilibrium this has generated will ultimately threaten the continuation of life on the planet's surface. Alongside these upheavals, human modes of life, both individual and collective, are progressively deteriorating. Kinship networks tend to be reduced to a bare minimum. Domestic life is being poisoned by the gangrene of mass media consumption. It is the relationship between subjectivity and its exteriority, be it social, animal, vegetable, or cosmic, that is compromised in a sort of general movement of implosion and regressive infantilization. We need then an ethico-political articulation, which I call ecosophy, between the three ecological registers, which is the environmental, social relations, and human subjectivity. End of quotation. Now, let's speak about degrowth in general terms. This notion, or maybe the most soft notion of post-growth, is very interesting because it may offer a solution to ecological crises in their three dimensions, not only environmental, but also social and mental. Clashes over the term degrowth sweep aside well-meaning ideas of sustainability or sustainable development, which, I quote here the Swiss philosopher Dominique Bourg, this sustainable development in the 40 years of existence have not succeeded in overtuning the prevailing tendency towards the degradation of the natural environment. I'm sorry for the project you have, which is undertitled Sustainable. Here is a critique of sustainability. While sustainable development transforms fundamental issues into technical issues, degrowth repoliticizes these issues and poses the questions of choice, hence the immense hostility with which it is met by orthodox economists who work for the neoliberal economy and thus proclaim the certainty that there is no alternative, which was the slogan of Margaret Thatcher a few men. Less is more. That is the precept of degrowth. However, it is not a case of straightforward reduction, but of qualitative transformation. The objective is not to make an elephant leaner, but to turn an elephant into a snail. I quote here some specialists of degrowth, economists. Happy restraint, it's another precept of degrowth, and which perhaps implies a low standard of living according to the criteria of the devotes of growth, but it also creates free time, desire, and energy for a large number of things currently neglected by the majority of our fellow citizenships, which is artistic practice, personal life, social life, solidarity, etc. In a society where degrowth would occur, art could play a major role and regain the socially important position it held in ancient and traditional societies. It's about decreasing in order to flourish better. Thinking about degrowth focuses on the fulfillment of values other than productivism. It stresses the impossibility of perpetual growth and the necessity of creating a bioeconomy, to conceive of the economy as existing within the biosphere. We can speak also about decolonizing the imaginary in order to be free from the false rationality of the Homo economicus and the economist totalitarianism. This is the aim of degrowth, according to the French theoretician Serge Latouche. Degrowth economists are critical of the use of the GDP, gross domestic product, as an indicator of success. I have here a nice quoting: calculating a nation's overall health according to its GDP makes about as much sense as evaluating the quality of a piece of music solely by counting the number of notes it contains. End of the quotation. All these economists take inspiration from philosophies such as the Buen Vivir from South America. They call for a different economy, an economy of solidarity and shared resources, a non-market economy. Another central value of degrowth is care, because, I quote here a specialist of care, working to lessen the vulnerability of others allows everybody to experience their own vulnerability and reflect on its characteristics. One final value, a vital one, is that of autonomy. I quote here another specialist: we can conceive of the path leading to growth as a path aimed at restoring autonomy as well as a process of liberation from dependence on alienating and heteronomous systems. Let's center now in music and degrowth. And first, music and degrowth in general terms. In the visual arts, first, the issue of degrowth is already being discussed with some acuity. Artists are turning their backs not only on the follies of the art market, but also on individual art, and they are reconnecting with art as auto-production, autonomy. Similarly, at least since the time of arte povera, the Italian big movement of 60s and 70s, a number of artists who do not completely reject the conventional art circuit have also been militants in the cause of degrowth. In music and sound art, degrowth as such is still relatively unexplored, but people are beginning to reflect it. I quote him some there was a symposium in 2016 organized by Carmen Pardo Salgado in Barcelona, and there were some previous articles, but only a few. The first question arising is such reflection is, at what level is degrowth applicable? Is it at the sound material level, in the resulting sound, or rather in what musicians call technique, which is the compositional technique or the technique of the performer? If that were so, John Cage's 4-minute 33 would be a perfect model of degrowth. Or even Webern's Symphony Opus 21, which, compared to the romantic or post-romantic symphony, is extremely short and has the orchestra playing paired Bach music, rather like chamber music. However, in these examples, degrowth can only ever be an appearance. Thus, also minimalism of the American music from the 60s, 70s, as exemplified by Steve Reich in Violent Phase or Music for 18 Musicians, denote an art of degrowth. First of all, although there is minimalism on one level, it is only in terms of compositional techniques. On the other hand, the music makes considerable technical demands of the instrumentalists. Furthermore, this musical tendency developed in reaction to the more austere music of the 50s, such as 4 minutes 33, and is more a symptom of the expansion of the American consumerist pleasure-seeking society, which is the very opposite of a concept of degrowth. So here I will give an example in music with traditional means, which is orchestra, which could be maybe an example of degrowth, or maybe more exactly of the notion of less is more. I'm taking it from the catalog of the Russian composer, exiled in Paris. It's important to precise he has the status of political refugee. He's against Putin and all the Russian situation today. A composer very nice called Dmitry Kuryansky. Maybe you know him. Dmitry Kuryansky is well known for making a kind of minimal conceptual music with noise. I've taken here the piece called Maps of Non-Existing Cities, subtitled Stockholm. This piece is from 2010. It is the first of the cycle of Maps of Non-Existing Cities compositions, consisting of pieces for various formations. But this piece gave to the cycle only its title. The other pieces are in open forms with graphic notation, while the piece Stockholm is classical notated and full determined. In fact, this piece is what Kuryansky considers. He told me that in a discussion we had for preparing my intervention. He considers it as belonging to his first way of composing. During this period, he was very interested in kinetic sculptures and in the Soviet constructivist tradition. He was interested in, about him, mechanical processes and how these mechanical processes produce a dramaturgy. He said, the scores consist of very reduced, very prescribed gesture factories and a kind of development, but not a development, rather a chain, so that at the end you see the whole process. Through this mechanization of processes, what is important is not so much the musical flow as such, but its perception by the listener. This is where the dramaturgy of the piece lies. To compose the piece, Kuryansky works in all the richness of the instruments, playing modes, and its relationship to history. We know that it's more difficult to get orchestral musicians to play new music with this plurality of playing modes. That's why he then, after this piece, Kuryansky began to compose with open works, graphical notation, and even with the participation of the audience, because this makes it easy. At the time of the Stockholm piece, he was still working strictly with the score and the musician gesture, which he thought of as a kind of small mechanism. Now, what is important for understanding is the piece is that shortly before the end, at page 40, we hear the a complete sound object with each central. This object has all the sound material. Here is it. So you have the score, you see the orchestra, and let's listen just a few seconds before this page 40. what comes before this extract is, to use a visual metaphor, like being in the dark at first, then gradually beginning to discern details. In fact, as Kurlianski explains, everything is there from the start, but it is perception that goes step by step. So the whole musical process consists of listening to different aspects of the object, and then towards the end, page 40, listening to the object in its entirety. That's why the process is not development. It's a path to wholeness, says Kurlianski. Here's the first page from the score where we have only a partial view of the object. Let's listen just the beginning of the score. I think you understand, huh? And it's a very quiet music, so I passed to continue. You can listen to it. It's freely in SoundCloud. You may have understood why I took this first example of orchestral music, traditional means, because of the question of development. Even if musicians understand this term in the tradition of German organism, which is processes that take as a model the development of a plant, so natural. But in fact, this term is contemporary. It's not foreign to what we understand by economic development, the industrial society of the 19th century. Society in which productivism and growth in the economic sense of the term culminate. I would say, even if I was very hard, that it's the organism is the ideological justification of industrialism. Of course, with moderation. Music is autonomous. What we have here is music that rejects development with Kurlianski. And so I asked finally Kurlianski about the idea that less is more and that we could try to do less with more. He said, I'm very interested in this idea. Right from the start, I've been thinking about this idea of degrowth. When I start composing, it's not a tabula rasa operation. In fact, everything is there. Everything is already here. The whole history of humanity, the whole history of music, it's all there. The music already composed, the music yet to be composed, the music that will never be composed. It's all there on the blank page. So my work is like the work of an archaeologist. It's all about removing unnecessary things. The tabula rasa comes at the end. The process consists in understanding the initial idea. Now, let's enter to technology. We saw here an example of degrowth, or better, less is more, with traditional means. But of course, the question of degrowth is most pressing when it comes to technologies, because then it touches on the production system of society itself. Music was one of the first arts to engage with the various forms of new technology as natural extensions of what musicians call technique. The founders of electroacoustic music, Edgar Varèse, Pierre Schaeffer, Pierre-Henry, Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, Yannis Xenakis, etc., exploited new technologies to develop a new kind of music and to naturalize technology, transforming it into technique in the musical sense. The same occurred in popular music with full integration of amplification, electric guitar, or effects created in the studio. This trend seems to have altered in the last few decades. technology is no longer always used for musical ends and instead tends to serve the productivist technological expansion within digital capitalism. The most striking change in the musical technological sphere of mass consumerism is that there is inversely proportional development. The more technology grows, the more music seems to disappear. We are heading towards a world in which the market will focus on a multitude of highly technological objects and on online tools that, in order to sell better, will be able to play music. In the sphere of contemporary music and music research, we are also witnessing a very fast growth in technology that does not have a specifically musical aim. Often, technologies are developed for their own sake, and the musical works simply serve to legitimize their existence. There are even some new technologies developed at great expense, which are still seeking composers and musical works to which they can be applied. This is the case for the spatialization technique known as wave-fit synthesis. This is probably the reason why many musicians have moved towards a more restrained use of technology, sometimes lo-fi or even self-produced, using cheap equipment and allowing the musician to rediscover their autonomy in the truest sense of the word. So autonomy of means of production, not only autonomy that music is autonomous, which is not only really autonomy, the real autonomy is this of the means of production. A major trend that could be seen as part of a move towards the growth include artists belonging to the do-it-yourself, hacking, and or maker movements, even though none of these musicians use the term degrowth or yet use, maybe they will use it very soon. Do-it-yourself is a well-known concept which, in musical terms, have been employed by a long line of artists. The term hacking, in the context of capitalist laws, is still associated in most people's mind with cyber attacks, but it is also used to mean do-it-yourself in the sense of adapting objects away from the original use or extending the scope of the original use. The term is thus linked to musicians and sound artists who hack electronic devices to make cheap instruments to modify the original purpose of machines or to reverse the gradual obsolescence of software. The maker movement places a new value on artisanal production, building bridges between electronic or robotic equipment and ancient skills such as woodwork and metalwork. It includes many new musical and sound practices. The birthplace of do-it-yourself is usually said to be America. I quote here Nicola Collins. At the end of the World War II, in Western Europe, there were institutions fostering electronic music. It was also, we have to say, New Eastern Europe, in Poland, etc. They had studios, whereas America had nothing like that. When John Cage worked with electronic sounds, we had to do it with little things on a record player, while in Europe, Karl Stockhausen had a studio. Although this vision is a little exaggerated, America did develop electronic music studios also in universities. It reflects the reality of do-it-yourself music pioneers as John Cage, David Tudor, as well as the Sonic Arts Union Collective, Robert Ashley, David Barham, Alvin Lucier, Gordon Muma. David Tudor's Rainforest sums up this approach. If you don't know, version 4 of this piece is an electroacoustic environment, very in fashion the last 20 years. It's a kind of an electroacoustic environment conceived by David Tudor and realized at that time by the group of composers inside electronics. Here is a video from a recent French performance, so with a lot of other musicians. You can see, which is very important, that this kind of music is not exactly music, it's a kind of social practice. It's changed totally the practice, musical practice, as when you said that you were performing music in not usual places, forest or not concerts place. So let's see here the place, beginning with 1 minute only sound from the place, and then the piece of David Tudor. In recent years, the book Handmade Electronic Music, The Art of Hardware Hacking by the New York musician Nicholas Collins has become a key reference for do-it-yourself and hacking. Collins is a composer, improviser, and performer working in the tradition of North American experimental music. He was a pupil of Alvin Lucier, and he collaborated with David Tudor. And he began experimenting with do-it-yourself and hacking early in his career. His early pieces, clearly influenced by Lucier, explore the use of the loudspeaker as one stage in musical production rather than the final point, and he does the same with resonance and feedback. In the 80s, he performed in New York with musicians from free jazz such as, or noise jazz, it's called, musicians like such as John Zorn, and tried to fuse improvisation techniques with electronic production. He then moved to Europe, where he explored interaction between musicians playing electronics. Back in America in 1999, teaching at the School of Art Institute of Chicago, he assembled the materials for his book because, encouraged by his students, he discovered his roots in what he called intuitive circuitry, which is the electronic way of making these devices. Collins' book does not theorize hacking. Like others working the same field, Collins prefers to focus on practice, although he does occasionally weave theoretical thinking into his reflection, such as in his collection of writings published in French. This book describes how to produce and/or modify electronic circuits quickly and cheaper in order to make music. So he makes contact microphones, oscillators, mixing decks, etc. For instance, I quote him, the easiest way to turn the disc into a contact mic is to solder it to an old guitar cable. Otherwise, use any shielded cable that's lying around. It is best to use shielded cable to keep the noise at an acceptable level and keep it less than 3 meters in length for the same reason. Cut the plug at one end if necessary and strip the cable as in the figure. So you see here the figure. Then solder the cable shielder, outer conductor, to the electrical wire attached to the metal edge of the piezoelectric disc. Then solder the inner conductor to the wire coming from the crystal as shown in another figure, etc., etc. Let's listen to Nicholas Collins' performance with his trumpet. He's also an improviser, as I said. Okay, this was an example. Now, I would like to finish with another example taken from another way of thinking how to optimize technology, not with do-it-yourself and hacking, but with a philosophy of what we call economy of means. I refer here to the work of the Italian composer Agostino Di Scipio, a well-known composer in the domain of electronics or live electronics and of sound installations. Di Scipio uses this expression, economy of means. Here is a quotation from an article in a collected book called Arts Ecology Transitions, Constructing a Common Vocabulary that colleagues from my university and myself have edited. Here is a quotation of Agostino Di Scipio. The prevailing economism considers ecology in terms of technological development and planning. Yet technologies urgently need to be viewed from a relational and ecological perspective. The paradigm must be reversed. Instead of approaching the environmental and ecology in economic and technocratic terms, the economy and technology need to be considered through a relational and ecological consciousness. Whilst economic growth and technological opulence have forged a dogma of indefinite progress without definition, end or goal, artists can act in other ways. They can appropriate their means of action, their workplaces, and reshape them according to an economy of means that is at once moderate and appropriate. More desirable than an indefinite development of technological competencies is the capacity to discern a necessary balance, a harmony between means and ends, a harmony always relative to a specific framework of action, to a given situation, that is in relation to changing but real material context. End of quotation. Agostino Di Scipio used complex technological equipment, but exploits its capacity fully. He also includes instruction in all his scores on how people can recreate his systems using open source software such as Pure Data, based on non-proprietary development. I will show you the instructions for a piece that we will view the performance, modes of interference number 2, for saxophone and computer using an autonomous feedback system. But let's see first the beginning of the performance, which was in my university 5 years ago, I think, or 6 years ago, with a very nice Brazilian, I think there is a Brazilian between us, saxophonist Pedro Bidancourt. So here is the performance, the beginning. It begins with a talk, and then the music begins slowly.
Both for the organization, for everybody being here. I'll talk about the piece, but I think it would be more interesting to listen to it, and then we can talk and discuss about it. As we have only these 2 loudspeakers, they're not very big, not very strong, but if you feel like you can get closer also and try to take the best point of listening.
Where?
For it.
Here?
Yeah, it's as you wish. Maybe very far it's going to be, no? Like this is better? More resonances. Yeah, okay, so it's good to have the composer nearby. Okay. If it doesn't work well, because every time we play this needs some slight adjustments, I'll just start again if it doesn't work well. So,
So, provisional conclusion. It's difficult to conclude on such a large topic. I gave some example, but of course, with this kind of practice, the important is not only the result, but also the process, the environmental, social, and mental making of what we call music or sound art. So it will be important to participate to the musical or sound performance that are shown to judge them. You can see it from two performances that are shown. I would like to conclude by returning to the very idea of degrowth. Among criticisms of this concept, one is especially recurrent, that it has an impoverishing effect and is synonymous with austerity. More generally, while the concept might be welcomed in the countries of the global south, as bricolage or do-it-yourself, not standing in the countries, of the global north, it is seen as only good for those who have failed in some way. The works of the economists specialized on degrowth demonstrate that the opposite is true. Degrowth must be applied first in rich countries if we want to save our planet. But how can people be convinced of this? A specialist in cultural economy says that despite the long existence of positional or ecological art, most of the conventional ideas of creativity, aesthetics, and cultural production that underpin the creative economy remain premised on an area of ideas rooted in Enlightenment, liberal, and modernist notions of innovation, progress, and growth, strongly enabled by carbon and resource-rich economies, and activated by autonomous individuals who have tended to prioritize the pursuit of personal creative freedoms over other social priorities. Michael Banks says that. This cultural economist concludes that to any given artist or cultural producer, taken at face value, degrowth might simply appear to a kind of her-shirted asceticism or exercise in joylessness. The key is just that, not to mistake the frugality encouraged by a post-growth society with an austerity or asceticism that we have not chosen. In the arts, emerging practices tending in this direction show that this distinction is perfectly possible. Values such as care, sharing, or autonomy that are introduced by degrowth, taken as a means to achieve a post-growth society and not as an end in itself, are in fact very close to the traditional values of what we call art. There is no degrowth music. The means of making music need to be envisioned in terms of degrowth. As I said already, it is about decreasing in order to flourish. Thank you very much for your attention.
Oh, okay, thank you very, very much. I forgot to unmute myself. The lecture was extremely inspiring, and the lecture opened up in extremely interesting perspective for understanding the relationship between music and ecology. The three environmental registers you mentioned in the lecture are to be the platform for shaping a post-growth society that promotes values different from those of the dominant social cultural model today, as I properly understood your ideas. The instrument in the process of shaping this new society is to be the paradigm of degrowth, simplification, as I understand. That is a move away from the extreme professionalization. Am I right or not? Maybe this problem of discussion. Professionalization of musical creativity and the ever-increasing complexity of compositional means. From your words, I understood that this ecological paradigm of the sonic future will determine a new model of culture in general. It's not only the problem of music, but it is a problem of model of new culture as a whole. Could you explain this target our envisioned model of culture in a little broader terms, as you said, the general culture from the perspective of this new music and new technology and new ecology of music. And thank you again. And if you could ask my question, we can just initiate our discussion then. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your remarks. Maybe just to add that it's not simplification, because complexity is very important. Nature, the living is very complex, so we need complexity. And the last musician I quote, Agostino Di Scipio, he made a rather complex, the performance. They took, first the system is very complex, then they took 2 hours to, in fact, to tune the system. The relationship with the environment is very complex. In fact, it's really complex, organic in that way. What we don't need is complication, which is not, it's a very different point. And what we don't need, we have to take away, rid of it. It's, of course, the fact that we are not making something which is useful for music, for human beings, and which is only there because to buy, because technology is progressing and we have to buy more and more complex equipment, etc. This is the thing we have to get rid. Not complexity, neither technology. Technology is very important, but we have to find other uses of technology. Of course, we have to get rid of some technologies, maybe atom technology. Okay, it's a big discussion. And the second point, very important, about professionalism. I think it's important that there are specialists, professionals, but of course, we have to get in touch with the society, like the last performance, which was with public very easily, or David Tudor performance with children, etc. But of course, we don't have to get rid of a musician professional. Okay, this is a very big discussion, but this is the part of social ecology, I would say, we can't discuss. Thank you for your...
Okay, thank you very much. And now, may I open some discussion? We have time, so please, who would like to comment and ask?
Slavka, we have received the questions in chat from Pavel Siechowicz. We have 2 questions. Can you see it in the chat?
Yes. So
I will be happy to ask them. Hello.
Hello, Pavel.
Thank you very much for an amazing lecture. It was very inspiring to me. I'm here with my student also, Ms. Zofia, so it is very nice listening to you. So I have 2 questions after your lectures. The first one is such. Colin Campbell, in a wonderful book, The Romantic Ethic and the Spirit of Modern Consumerism, established a link between the Romantic culture of the 19th century and the development of modern consumerism. Do you think that the growth practices in music and art in general can shape or influence somehow consumer practices today? And the other question is more general, maybe. What do you think? How do you imagine the future of very costly practices of classical music, like opera? What do you think about it?
Okay, thank you very much. I will try to be short. I don't know Campbell book, but it seems very interesting. I think that there is a relationship between Romanticism and industrialism in a way. Romanticism was the counterpoint of industrialism. It's we can discuss a long time. It's the same as the what we call naturalism music. In fact, it was the complement of the domination of nature that we have in Western societies. So it was to be equilibrated. The Western society produced a domination of nature and of human being, domination of human being very hard. And it has music art to legitimate it. That doesn't mean that musicians were collaborating with the domination. I don't say that, but it's part of. It's why I said that naturalism is not good for music. We need ecology. We need practical relationship to talk about nature in general and to continue to compose opera. This is another question. It's not ecological at all. You can make the biggest opera with I love nature, we need ecology, but if you continue to use very big means, it's not ecology at all. So it's answer also to your second question, I think, that of course we need practice to revise our practices very much. Of course we have to be careful. It's not that we say to the politicians, Europe or your countries, we need no lesser money because they will be very glad. We need money, a lot of money, more than technologies, but we have to put the money to good things, not to develop operas. Okay, opera, okay, we know what is opera, and okay, I'm sorry, I don't want to speak against opera.
Yeah, but I think it is a problem. It is a problem how to maintain this. And I think that the one of the approaches is to make it broadly available. So it is still an elite thing to go to the opera. And there are many ways in which technology can help us to make it more accessible. So I think that it might be one of the arguments towards still financing opera by state or some private funds.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And maybe the last question, if there's someone.
We still have two. We still have two people who want to talk.
Eva.
Yes, hi. I just wanted to comment on some composers' practices as we perform a lot of contemporary music with the Berg Orchestra. So very often if you perform a work that is by a composer who has access to large contemporary music ensembles, etc., they use, let's say, 50 percussion instruments and many of them just once. And, you know, I don't think they are thinking practically. I think it also has something to do with, you know, degrowth and these philosophies, because very often when I see the score and see how often the instruments are employed, I think, well, why? You know, so that's just my remark.
Thank you very much. I agree totally.
It's like, you know, they are having a toy shop, basically, but it doesn't really make sense to me.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you very much. And I think it's time to close our discussion because at 12 o'clock we should start our next session. So thank you, Professor Solomos, very, very much for extremely interesting lecture, at least for me. I mean, completely new problems and new perspectives. Thank you so much. And now, dear colleagues, I think it's time we should start our next session, session number 1. Please, Olga, you are chair lady. Please start the session.